There's a point in life where silence becomes your strongest answer. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understand that most things do not deserve your reaction anymore. You used to explain yourself too much. You used to defend your actions, your choices, your truth. You used to waste energy trying to make people understand you who were never willing to understand you in the first place. And what did it give you? Exhaustion, confusion, and a mind always stuck in other people's opinions. But something changes when you grow. You stop reacting to every word thrown at you. You stop chasing closure from people who only gave you chaos. You stop entering battles that were never worth your peace because you realize something powerful. Not every fire deserves your water. Not every insult deserves your response. Not every opinion deserves your attention. The quiet power begins the moment you understand this. When you no longer react, people start to see a version of you they cannot control anymore. They try to provoke you and fail. They try to hurt you and get silence instead of drama. And that silence confuses them more than any argument ever could, because people are used to your reaction, your anger, your explanations, your emotional response. But when you remove that, you remove their control over you. And that is where power begins. Not loud power, not attention-seeking power, but the kind of power that sits quietly and does not need to prove itself. But let me be honest with you. Getting here is not easy, because reacting is addictive. It feels like you are doing something. It feels like you are standing up for yourself. But most of the time, you are just feeding situations that are draining you. Every reaction is a piece of your energy given away. And slowly, you start living more in other people's worlds than your own. The moment you stop reacting, you start observing. And observation changes everything. You begin to see people for who they actually are, not who they pretend to be, not who you wish they were, but who they consistently show you they are. And once you see clearly, you stop wasting emotion, you stop wasting time, and you start protecting your peace like it is the only thing that matters. Because in reality, it is. If you understand this, then you're already stepping into a different level of mindset, a level where life does not control you through emotion anymore. It cannot pull you into every argument. It cannot disturb you with every opinion. It cannot break your focus with every insult. You are no longer reacting. You are responding with silence. And silence is not weakness. Silence is control. Silence is discipline. Silence is power that does not need approval. Now, before we go deeper into what this silence actually does to your life, the first thing people misunderstand about silence is simple. They confuse it with weakness. They think when you don't react, you have nothing to say. They think you are scared. They think you are losing, but they are only seeing the surface. Because real silence is not emptiness. It is control. And control is something most people never learn. When you react to everything, you are not powerful. You are exposed. You are emotionally open to every trigger around you. A random comment can change your mood. A disrespectful word can ruin your entire day. A negative person can pull you into a mental war you didn't even choose. That is not strength. That is lack of boundaries with your own mind. But when you start to stop reacting, something shifts inside you. You become harder to read, not because you are hiding, but because you are no longer leaking your emotions everywhere. People cannot tell what affected you. They cannot tell what hurt you. They cannot tell if they even matter to your mental space anymore. And that confuses them, because most people are used to instant reactions. They're used to responses. They're used to emotional feedback from you. But when they don't get it anymore, they lose control over the situation. And that is where your real power begins. Not in shouting louder, not in proving a point, but in refusing to participate in emotional chaos. Here is something hard to accept. Most people don't argue because they want truth. They argue because they want reaction. They want to pull you into their emotional level. They want to see you lose calm. They want to feel like they can still move you. But the moment you stop reacting, you remove their reward. And when there is no reward, their behavior loses meaning. That is why silence feels uncomfortable for them. Because silence is not empty. Silence is rejection without explanation. And people hate being ignored more than they hate being disagreed with. But let's be honest here. Stopping your reactions is not easy at first, because reacting feels like power. It feels like you are standing up for yourself. It feels like you're defending your identity. But most of the time, you are not defending yourself. You are just entering unnecessary battles that drain your focus, your time, and your peace. Every reaction takes energy, and most people spend their entire day reacting to messages, to words, to opinions, to situations that will not even matter a week later. And slowly, without realizing it, they start living outside themselves. Their mind is no longer their own space. It becomes a reaction machine, always responding, always defending, always emotionally active, but never truly calm. And when you're always reacting, you cannot think clearly. You cannot grow properly. You cannot focus deeply on your goals, because your attention is constantly pulled outward. The moment you start practicing silence, something uncomfortable happens. You start noticing how automatic your reactions were, how quickly you used to respond without thinking, how often you gave importance to things that did not deserve it. And that awareness can feel uncomfortable, because now you are responsible for your reactions. You cannot blame people anymore. You cannot blame situations anymore. You start seeing the real problem, your impulse control. And here's the truth most people avoid. Your life changes the moment your reactions change, not your circumstances, not other people, your reactions. Because when you stop reacting to everything, you start choosing what deserves your attention. And that is where real discipline begins. Now you are no longer emotionally available for every distraction. Now you are no longer controlled by every situation. Now you are building a mind that does not get easily pulled away. And that is rare, because most people are controlled by their feelings. But you are learning to control your response. And that is the difference between a reactive person and a powerful one. Now, let's go deeper into what actually changes in your life when you stop reacting, because this is where most people misunderstand silence. They think it is only about ignoring people, but it is not. It is about reclaiming your mind. When you are reactive, your life is not really yours. It belongs to whatever is happening around you. Someone says something, you react. Something goes wrong, you panic. Someone disrespects you, you respond instantly. Your emotions are not guided by your goals anymore. They are guided by external triggers. And that is why most people feel mentally exhausted even when they do nothing all day, because they are constantly reacting. Now imagine a different version of you. Something happens, but you don't react immediately. You pause internally. You observe instead of respond. You think before you give your energy away. That small shift changes everything, because now you are no longer controlled by events. You are interpreting them. And interpretation gives you power. When you don't react instantly, you create space. And in that space, clarity enters. You start seeing who deserves your attention and who does not. You start understanding which battles are real and which are just distractions dressed as problems. Most people lose energy not because life is hard, but because they fight everything like it matters equally. It does not. Some things deserve silence. Some people deserve no response at all. Some situations only exist to test your emotional control. And if you fail that test every time, you stay stuck at the same mental level. But when you learn to stay quiet in moments where you used to react, you start upgrading your identity. You become someone who is not easy to manipulate, someone who is not easy to pull into drama, someone who does not break discipline for emotional impulses. And slowly, people around you start noticing, not because you announce anything, but because your energy changes. You don't argue as much. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't chase understanding from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And here is something important. When you stop reacting, you'll feel uncomfortable at first, because your mind is used to expression, used to release, used to instant response. So silence will feel like you are holding something back. But you are not holding back. You are holding control. And that control is what separates emotional living from disciplined living. Most people think discipline is only about working hard, waking up early, following routines. But real discipline starts in your reactions. Can you stay calm when you are disrespected? Can you stay quiet when someone is trying to provoke you? Can you refuse to respond even when your ego is screaming? That is real discipline. And that discipline builds a stronger version of you than any motivation ever could, because motivation is temporary. But control over your reactions becomes your personality. And once it becomes your personality, you are no longer easily shaken. You stop reacting not because you don't feel anything, but because you understand not everything deserves a response. And that understanding changes how you move through life. You start choosing your battles. You start protecting your focus. You start valuing your peace more than being right. And that is where real transformation begins. There's a stage in this journey where something inside you starts to change in a way you cannot fully explain at first. You are still the same person on the outside. Same face, same voice, same life problems. But your reaction to life is no longer the same. And that is where everything begins to shift. Things that used to instantly trigger you no longer reach you the same way. Words that once stayed in your mind for hours now pass through you in seconds. Situations that used to ruin your mood no longer have that kind of power over your day. And the strange part is, you did not become emotionless. You became selective with your emotions. And people around you notice it before you even fully understand it yourself. They feel the distance, not physical distance, but emotional distance. You are still present, but you are no longer easily pulled into chaos. You are there, but not available for every reaction. And that confuses people who are used to your emotional responses. Because for a long time, your reactions were predictable. Someone provoked you. You reacted. Someone disrespected you. You responded. Someone tried to push your buttons. You gave them a reaction. That pattern made you easy to read and easy to control. But now that pattern is breaking. And when people cannot predict your reaction, they start to lose control over how they affect you. And that is when your power becomes noticeable. Not loud power, not aggressive power, but silent emotional control. And here is something uncomfortable you start realizing at this stage. A lot of your past emotional suffering was not just caused by people. It was caused by your participation in their behavior. You kept engaging. You kept responding. You kept feeding situations that should have ended the moment they started. You gave energy to words that had no real value. You gave attention to people who only wanted your reaction, not your peace. And now that you are stepping back from that pattern, you start seeing your past differently. You start realizing how many unnecessary battles you fought, how many pointless explanations you gave, how many times you tried to prove yourself to people who were never interested in understanding you in the first place. And that realization hits hard, because now you see how much energy you wasted on things that did not deserve it. But let's be honest, this stage is not peaceful at the beginning. It is uncomfortable, because when you stop reacting, the world around you does not immediately respect your silence. People who are used to your reactions start testing you. They say things to provoke you. They behave in ways designed to pull you back into old patterns. They want to see if you are still the same person they used to control emotionally. They want confirmation that you can still be pulled into arguments, still be distracted, still be emotionally available for chaos. And this is where most people fail, because silence feels like holding back. And holding back feels unnatural at first. So they react again. They respond again. They fall back into the same emotional loop. And they lose the progress they were building internally. But if you stay aware during this phase, something deeper starts developing inside you. You begin to see people without emotional filters. You stop seeing them based on how you feel about them, and start seeing them based on how they actually behave consistently. You notice patterns. You notice intentions behind words. You notice who respects your silence, and who only valued your reactions. And this clarity changes how you choose people in your life. You stop giving access to your emotions so easily. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop treating every situation like it deserves your energy, because now you understand something very important. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not every comment deserves your attention. Not every situation deserves your involvement. Some things are designed only to distract you. Some people are only comfortable when you are emotionally unstable, and your silence becomes your filter, not because you are scared to speak, but because you are wise enough not to waste yourself. And this is where awareness becomes your strongest tool. When you are emotional, you react first and think later. When you are aware, you think first and often choose silence over reaction. That choice is not easy, because your ego constantly tries to pull you back into emotional responses. It tells you that you need to defend yourself. It tells you that staying silent means losing. It tells you that not reacting means weakness. But over time, you start realizing something deeper. You do not lose respect by staying silent. You lose control by reacting to everything. And control is more valuable than temporary validation, because validation depends on other people. But control belongs to you. And once you start protecting your control over your reactions, you start protecting your life itself. Your focus becomes sharper. Your energy becomes cleaner. Your decisions become calmer. And your identity starts shifting into someone who is no longer easily moved by external noise. At this point in your transformation, something very real starts happening to the version of you that used to react to everything. It does not disappear loudly. It does not collapse in a dramatic way. It fades, slowly, quietly, almost so subtle that you do not notice at first. The old version of you that used to argue, explain, defend, overthink, and emotionally respond to every small trigger starts losing strength, not because life became easier, but because you stopped feeding it. And that is the part most people never understand. Your reactive self is not your identity. It is a habit, and habits survive only as long as you keep repeating them. The moment you stop reacting, you are not just changing behavior. You are starving a version of yourself that was built on impulse. And at first, your mind resists this. It feels unnatural, because reacting used to give you a false sense of control. You used to feel like if you did not respond immediately, you were losing. If you did not defend yourself instantly, you were weak. If you stayed silent, you were accepting disrespect. But over time, something deeper becomes clear. Most of what you reacted to did not need your energy at all. It only needed your attention. And attention is where most people lose themselves. Because once something gets your attention, it gets your emotions. And once it gets your emotions, it gets your reactions. And once it gets your reactions, it controls your peace. But now you are starting to interrupt that chain. There's a pause between what happens and what you do next. And that pause is not emptiness. It is power. In that pause, you are no longer a slave to impulse. You are no longer automatically responding to everything that touches your emotions. You are observing first, thinking first, deciding first, and sometimes choosing nothing at all. And that nothing is what confuses people most, because most people expect immediate emotional feedback from you. They are used to your reaction being part of the system. Someone says something disrespectful, they expect you to respond. Someone provokes you, they expect anger. Someone misunderstands you, they expect explanation. But now they are not getting that predictable response anymore. And when people lose predictability, they start losing control over how they influence you. That is when your silence becomes noticeable, not because it is loud, but because it breaks expectations. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people around you are not trying to understand you. They are testing your emotional boundaries. They want to see what still triggers you, what still hurts you, what still pulls you into reaction, because your reaction is proof to them that they still have access to your emotional state. And once you stop giving that access, they feel it. Some will respect it immediately. They will adjust their behavior. They will calm down. They will stop pushing unnecessary buttons. Not because they suddenly became better people, but because your reaction was the fuel they were using, and now that fuel is gone. But others will not adjust. They will escalate. They will try harder. They will push more aggressively. They will say things in different ways just to get any reaction out of you, because they are not comfortable with your silence. Your silence removes their influence, and people who rely on emotional influence do not like losing it. But if you stay aware during this phase, something very important happens inside you. You stop interpreting everything personally. You stop seeing every comment as a challenge to your identity. You start seeing behavior for what it is instead of what your ego tells you it is. And that shift is powerful, because now you are not reacting to every emotional spark. You are analyzing it. You are filtering it. You are deciding whether it even deserves space in your mind. And most of the time, you realize it does not. This is where your emotional discipline begins to stabilize. You are no longer living inside reactions. You are living above them. You are no longer pulled into every situation. You are choosing your involvement, and that choice is rare, because most people are controlled by urgency. They feel something and they act immediately, but you are learning something different. You are learning that urgency is not truth. Urgency is just emotion demanding control. And when you stop obeying urgency, you start reclaiming your mind, and that is when your identity starts to shift permanently. Now you reach the final stage of this transformation, and this is where everything becomes very simple. Not easy, but simple. You stop reacting not because life stops challenging you, but because you finally understand what reaction really costs you. Every reaction is a trade. You trade your peace for a moment of expression. You trade your focus for a moment of ego satisfaction. You trade your direction for a moment of emotional release. And when you keep making that trade again and again, you slowly lose control over your own life. But now you are no longer that person. You're no longer available for every emotional trap. You're no longer reacting just to feel heard. You are no longer explaining yourself just to be understood by people who are not even listening properly. You start noticing something very different about yourself. You are calmer in situations that used to disturb you deeply. You are quieter in conversations that used to pull you into arguments. You are more selective with your energy, your words, and your attention. And because of that, people start reacting differently to you. Some people will respect this version of you. They will feel your stability. They will feel your distance from chaos. And they will either adjust or leave you alone. But others will not understand it, because they were only connected to your reactions, not your real presence. And when they no longer get emotional responses from you, they lose interest, or they try to pull you back into old patterns. But here is where you stand firm, not through aggression, not through arguments, but through control. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing to respond to everything. You stop needing to fix every misunderstanding immediately, because you realize something very important. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Not every situation deserves your voice. Not every person deserves your emotional energy. Silence becomes your standard response, not your emotional escape. And this is where real strength shows itself, because anyone can react. Anyone can get angry. Anyone can speak when triggered. But very few people can stay in control when everything inside them is pushing for reaction. That is discipline. That is maturity. That is inner power. And once you reach this level, your life starts changing in ways that are not always visible at first. Your mind feels lighter. Your decisions feel clearer. Your focus becomes stronger. And your emotional stability becomes your advantage in everything you do. Now here is the final truth. You are not becoming someone who feels nothing. You are becoming someone who is no longer controlled by what they feel. And that is the difference between a reactive life and a powerful life, between chaos and control, between noise and silence. And if you have understood this, then you are already ahead of most people around you, because most people will spend their entire life reacting. But you are choosing something different. You are choosing control. Now, if this message hit you in any way, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment your experience. Not because you have to, but because your story might help someone else who is still stuck in reaction. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it.